welcome to wisetake.com. This is CK013. You can find me on Twitter at CK_013. And yes, we are bringing you another NBA DFS podcast. It is Monday, March 13th, 2017. We've got 8 awesome games on tonight's slate. Hopefully you enjoyed your weekend. I know I did. A buddy of mine came in from Phoenix, Arizona. We go way back. It's always nice to spend time with friends and family. Brings everybody together. And hopefully you did something similar. Hopefully you did spend some time with the wife, with the kids, with whomever it is that you may have to spend some time to. It's better off, and you'll feel better about playing DFS during the week. Anyway, we got a lot to get to today, so we're going to start off with some injuries, as we always do, before we dive in position by position. Frank Kaminsky is questionable with a shoulder versus Chicago. Miles Plumlee is out with a calf versus Chicago. Nerlens Noel is questionable with a knee at Toronto. DeMarre Carroll is questionable with an ankle against Dallas. Mike Dunleavy is out with an ankle at San Antonio. Malcolm Brogdon is questionable with a back at Memphis. Mirza Teletovic is questionable with a hamstring at Memphis. Michael Beasley is expected to be out with a knee at Memphis, but we are going to have to monitor that closely just in case. Derek Favors is questionable with a knee against the Clippers. Rudy Gobert is also questionable with a leg against the Clippers. Sheldon Mack is questionable with an ankle against the Clippers. Jameer Nelson is questionable with a hip against the Lakers. Wilson Chandler is probable against the Lakers, and Kenneth Faried is expected to be out with his back against the Lakers. So that's just the injuries that we know about. Obviously, you're going to have to pay attention. I can't tell you enough how important information is when you are trying to win money in DFS. You got to be on the ball. You got to be able to react to news. We interpret news, we react to news, and that's going to determine whether or not you're a winner or a loser for the night. Anyway, let's dive in. We got some interesting plays to go over today. We're going to start off with point guard, as we always do. John Wall is the most expensive point guard, as he typically is, on a slate without a Westbrook or Harden, and he is 10-2 with a matchup against Minnesota. The total is actually pretty nice here. Now, Minnesota's pace is typically pretty slow. However, I don't mind targeting them. As hot as Rubio has been offensively, it does not mean anything regarding his defense. So I think John Wall is perfectly in play here. You do want to keep in mind that they have been on the road for a little while, and they did just play, I think they had a back-to-back and double overtime. I know they had at least 2 games in a row with overtime, so you got to wonder if their legs are a little bit tired. But the total's up there, so I think he's definitely in play at 10-2. You know what his upside is. He's capable of getting you 60 points on any given day. So, if he doesn't live up to it, you're hurting. But if he does, it's great. So I wouldn't put him in cash because of his price. But in GPPs, he's certainly in play. Giannis has a matchup against Memphis. Obviously, a much slower-paced team and a better defensive team, but he's 9-8, so he is cheap. He's underneath that 10K mark that we always kind of compare him to. So I think at 9-8, he's not somebody that I'm going to be targeting just because I don't like to target people against Memphis with that pace. But I certainly don't blame you if you want to try it because of his discount. Chris Paul's got a matchup with Utah at 8-2. Paul has not been coming around. A lot of people are speculating that maybe he's hurt. His minutes are there, and he did have a good game against Philly, putting up 48.75 DraftKings points. He's 8-2. We've seen what Westbrook can do to Utah. We just saw Westbrook put up, I think, 70-plus DraftKings points on Utah. However, he is the one matchup-proof guy. I don't think Chris Paul kind of falls in that category, especially because at least Westbrook himself on his side of the ball will play fast. Chris Paul and the Clippers typically play a little slower also. So this could be I'm expecting this game to be pretty low scoring, and Chris Paul at 8-2, even though it's cheap and tempting, I don't think I'm going to go there. Kemba Walker has been red hot. He's 8,100. His price just won't go up, and people won't seem to play him. I think that's going to end. I think people are going to jump on him. Chicago has yielded a ridiculous amount of fantasy points to point guards, and Kemba Walker has been smashing as of late. He kind of killed everybody against Orlando, putting up 29, but then against New Orleans, we saw him put up 54.5. So I definitely think Kemba's in play. If you feel that he's going to be a little chalky that night, then obviously you might want to pivot. But if you don't think people are going to be on him, which is very possible, then I would probably jump on that train at 8-1. However, in my personal opinion, I think he might be a little chalky. I would think that people have smartened up. The guy's broken 40 DraftKings points 3 out of the last 4 games, and he's coming off a game where he broke 50. So I would assume, plus he's at home against Chicago, a team that we just watched Elf drop 70 on. So I think that he will be mega chalky. And if I get the idea that he's going to be chalk, I think I'll be looking elsewhere. But as of now, obviously on paper, Kemba Walker seems to be an elite play. Mike Conley at 7-8. His price is right, and we don't like to typically target point guards against Milwaukee. However, Malcolm Brogdon might be out. If he's out, it's going to be Delly all by himself. And I think that puts Mike Conley in play. Not that Dellavedova is not a good defender. He certainly is. That's why he's in the league. However, I think a guy like Conley can really work can really outlast a guy like Dellavedovich. He's getting all the minutes. And obviously, if you bring in a backup, he's not going to be as good of a defender as Malcolm Brogdon. So if Brogdon is still out, I would possibly consider Connolly for a tournament. Definitely wouldn't trust him in cash games, however. D'Angelo Russell is 7,700. He's got a matchup with Denver. Phenomenal matchup. Really love Russell. He's the guy that I would imagine to be the second chalk. He is on the back end of a back-to-back, and his team is, according to Vegas, predicted to be blown out. I don't care. I definitely love that game in general, and I'm sure I'll be looking that way. It's the highest total of the night, and I think, especially with the fact that Jameer Nelson might be out. He's questionable, I think. If Nelson doesn't play, that's going to leave pretty much just Moutier and Jamal Murray, neither of which are too intimidating on the defensive end. So I definitely like Russell at 7-7. Even though the price is a little uncomfortable, he's still certainly in play. Obviously, you could look at guys like Elf. You could look at Rubio at 6'8", George Hill. A lot of these guys, even George Hill at 6'2". I would rather play George Hill over Chris Paul, just going back to Paul, just because of the fact that he's cheaper. He's 6,002 compared to Chris Paul, who's in the 8s. And George Hill, and to be honest, targeting point guards against Chris Paul since he's been back from injury has kind of been a cool thing. His defense hasn't been nearly as stellar as we saw in the beginning of the season. I think that's kind of why people seem to think he's hurt. So at 6'2", if you want to take a wild shot, why not? Personally, I still wouldn't go there. I just don't see why. The total's going to be low. The pace is going to be slow, so I wouldn't go there. Dennis Schroeder, I think Patty Mills is going to be starting at point guard. I think Tony Parker, I believe, is out. And so I think when you're looking at there, it's still San Antonio. They're not the same San Antonio team. However, LaMarcus Aldridge is out with his, I think it's a heart injury. I'm not exactly sure. And then we know that obviously Tony Parker, we already know is out. Now, Kawhi Leonard may or may not play. If Kawhi Leonard plays, then I think that you can kind of look at a guy like Patty Mills. He's somebody I'm definitely interested in. I think he's like 4-4 on DraftKings today, and I love targeting point guards against Atlanta. He has a matchup with Dennis Schroeder. So Patty Mills, especially in cash games, I think you kind of have to lock him in. Also Murray, the backup, is also out. So I think Mills is in for a lot of minutes, whether they like it or not. So at 4-4, I think he's somebody you want to solidify in your cash games. Going back to the top, I don't necessarily like Jordan Clarkson in this matchup. He's okay at 5'5", but I will say on Sunday night, he really tore it up against Philly. That's something you want to pay attention to going forward, is targeting shooting guards against Philly. Anyway, so yeah, I think Patty Mills is definitely a way to go. If Nelson is out, Jamal Murray is definitely someone you're going to want to consider at 4-1. I love targeting point guards against D'Angelo Russell and the Lakers, and at 4-1, he's going to save you a lot of salary. Plus, you can also play him at shooting guard, so you could potentially get away with two value guards in the slate to be able to afford the guys like Jokic and all those other guys we'll talk about later. Anyway, moving on to shooting guard, we've got DeMar DeRozan at 8-4. We know his usage is there, but his team has been playing extremely slow without Lowry, and they're playing a team, one of the only teams that's actually slower than them. So it's still not a direction that I think I want to go, but I completely understand with that usage rate if you want to take a shot. Bradley Beal is 7,600. He's got a matchup at Minnesota. Remember, there's no more Levine over there, so there's really nobody to stop him unless they decide to stick Wiggins on him. And they can't even really do that because Otto Porter is also an elite scorer, so they're going to need Wiggins to cover him. So I think that's going to leave a lot of opportunities for Bradley Beal. Nick Batum at 7-2, certainly in play against Chicago. It seems like he woke up a little bit in his last game, and Chicago is not playing well on either side of the ball, so I certainly see merit in playing Batum at 7-2. Also, he's small forward eligible, so you can pretty much put him in 4 different spots today. That's also, it's nice to have flexible players. Dwayne Wade at 6'7". I don't think I want him on a back-to-back, especially not with some Batum defense. I'm going to avoid that. Seth Curry has been red hot. He's got a matchup with DeRozan. Targeting shooting guards against DeRozan lately has been great, and I think Seth Curry just kind of burned the world in his last contest. Shot 1 for 8, got 10.25 DraftKings points, really ending his hot run he had going there. But I think there's a good chance he snaps out of it. Like I said, I'm not crazy about the game in general because both of these teams are two of the slower-paced teams in the league. But it's a situation where people are off of him. Toronto is not a good defensive team, and Seth Curry has been shooting the ball well with the exception of his last game. So if you think he's going to shoot the ball well again today, it's definitely a good idea to hop back on him in tournaments. Gary Harris is 5,800. That's a little too expensive for me for this guy, but his minutes are there, and his upside has been there. So if you want to go there against the Lakers, I certainly see merit in it. A couple guys that stand out to me. I think Fournier stands out at 5.6 against Sacramento. We saw Beal the other day go nuts against Sacramento. Shooting guards have been completely torching this team. So at 5'6", if you want to play Fournier, I'm completely with that. Even with Vooch back, Fournier is one of those guys whose usage isn't necessarily solidified in the rotation. So he's a tournament-only play, but you know he's going to get the minutes, and he can go off on any given night. We know that. Also, Brandon Ingram's worth talking about. He's 5'1", And his price, obviously 5'1", his price went up. He's small forward eligible as well, so you have that flexibility. But he's finally been kind of performing a little bit. He's been taking more shots and, more importantly, making more shots. We've seen his last 3 contests, he played 39, 35, and 41 minutes. Now, the minutes were never a problem. It was his production. However, in the last 3 games, he's taken 13, 9, and 11 shots. So the opportunities are coming. His scores over the last 3 games have been dramatically increased. 27.5, 24.5, and 31 DraftKings points in his last 3 contests. So I think he's definitely somebody worth mentioning. Obviously, if you dig a little deeper, you might be able to find some value. Will Barton's always an interesting GPP play. His minutes are never secure, so you never want to play him in cash. I understand Tony Allen is supposed to be starting for Memphis at 4,300. He's certainly in play, not really intimidated, and they're going to need him to guard some people. He's one of their better defenders, so definitely in play. We're waiting on the Carroll news. If we find out Carroll is not going to play, Norman Powell obviously becomes an option at 4,200. And Jamal Murray also, we talked about him being shooting guard eligible, so he's on the page too. Moving on to small forward, Kawhi Leonard is 9.9. He's super expensive, but I can tell you that if he does play, he's questionable with a concussion. If he does play, he's going to get all the usage for that team. It's just going to be the Kawhi Leonard show. The problem is they're playing Atlanta, and they have a couple good defenders on that Atlanta team, so it might not be so easy. But he's still Kawhi Leonard. You got to wonder if he's got a concussion issue. You got to wonder if he's all with it during the game. But if he is, definitely an option. He's 9.9 though, so you're definitely going to pay for it. If this guy don't get at least 50 DraftKings points, you're going to be very, very upset at 9.9. We talked about Giannis. Jimmy Butler, 9.3. The guy's just not playing well. It seems like he doesn't really care. It seems like he's not trying. Charlotte has been particularly bad against small forwards, and because Butler's had a couple bad games, I would imagine people are going to kind of let him go. So if you want to pivot off of Kawhi and you have the salary, Jimmy Butler is certainly interesting. I know I didn't exactly give the best sales pitch on him, but sometimes in GPPs you got to take chances on guys that nobody else is willing to, and that's how you stand out. So I think Jimmy Butler at 9.3, even though he hasn't been playing well, he does find himself in a particularly good matchup, and he should be considered. However, keep in mind both these teams play slower, and the total is pretty low in this game. Gordon Hayward at 74, I think I'll pass. He's going to have some Mamute defense. I don't want any piece of that. Wilson Chandler is probable, I believe. If Chandler does play, I don't think I want him at 72. I think I'd rather just play the Joker. Now, if for any reason, the only time I like to play Chandler is when there's injuries, because they have no choice but to play the guy. If Chandler, for any reason, was out, you can look at Will Barton, Gallinari, and even Hernan Gomez, who we'll talk about in the power forward positions. But if everybody's healthy, which it seems like most everybody is healthy, 7,200, in my opinion, is just too much to pay for the guy. Andrew Wiggins is 7,100. He continues to play like crap, and it's crazy. His usage rate is super high, and he was crushing it for a while. His shot attempts are still there. He's just shooting horribly. 3 out of his last 4 games, he failed to break 30% field goal percentage. This guy is taking the shots: 24 shots, 17 shots, 21 shots, 13 shots. However, 6 for 24, 5 for 17, 9 for 21, and 3 for 13. So he's still Andrew Wiggins. He's still going to chuck up those shots. And the 7,100, you got to keep playing him in tournaments, because one of these days he's going to go off for 50 points again, and you're going to want to be on that train. So Wiggins is definitely a guy that stands out. Wiggins is definitely a guy that I like. We talked about Gallinari at 6'2". Gallinari, if everybody's healthy, again, is another guy I don't necessarily want to go to. But if Wilson Chandler is out, we know he's going to get the minutes. Even in cash games, if you want to play Gallo, it's a great matchup for him against Ingram. Really not afraid of Ingram's defense. The dude's about 140 pounds soaking wet, so that don't really scare me. But I don't think I want to take him, because I don't think his shot attempts are going to be there, or his usage will be there if Chandler is on the court. So Gallo only if Chandler is out, and Chandler is probable. But again, you got to pay attention. If there's some news that breaks out before lock and you didn't catch it, you didn't play him, by now you should know. That's on you. Anyway, Chris Middleton's interesting against Memphis, but again, I don't like targeting people against them. Barnes against Toronto, it's just a slow-paced matchup. I don't think you have to go there. I did mention Ingram. If I'm going to play Ingram, it'd probably be at shooting guard, just because there seems to be a lack of depth at that position today. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist certainly in play with Kaminsky out. They need another rebounder. He could be that guy. And I would assume they're going to rely on him to help out defensively, whether it's covering Wade or whether it's covering Butler, whatever they decide to do with him and Batum. All right, we're going to move on to power forward. Karl Anthony Towns is 10-6. He's center eligible. He's in a monster spot. He's coming off a fantastic game. But again, you're paying that price. I don't mind it. Washington isn't particularly the best at defending the center position, or power forward position either, for that matter, which is what they like to consider Towns. So I definitely like Towns at 10-6. It's just if you can afford him, that's the question. We do have some value that may be open now and some more potentially opening up later, but Towns is definitely a guy you got to consider. Blake Griffin at Utah, 8,300. This is interesting. If I was going to play a guy from this game, it'd probably be Blake. Derek Favors is questionable. I think he might be closer to doubtful, and if he doesn't play, they're not really going to have a big man down there, especially if Gobert is out. If Gobert and Favors are both out, there's really nobody protecting the rim, and I think Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan are just going to eat at that point. So those are the only guys that I would consider. Again, I'm not a fan of the game. It's slow pace, low total. Not some more I'm dying to go, but I do think it's a decent contrarian option. I think Julius Randle's going to be pretty chalky. 7,500, that's just too much for my blood. And he's got a matchup with Denver. I understand it's a pace-up spot, but it is the back end of a back-to-back. I've seen Randle struggle in these situations before, and he's not somebody I'm going to be playing. He's somebody I could tell you guys, and if I'm wrong, you could bash me on Twitter. You could leave some comments. It's all good. I'm all in for the feedback. But Julius Randle at 7,500, I think I'll pass. I'm fully going to fade that dude. I can tell you that. Paul Millsap at 6,900. Definitely interesting without Aldridge. I think a lot of people aren't going to realize Aldridge isn't playing, and they're not going to realize that means there's nobody to cover Paul Millsap. You're looking at, I believe, Dwayne Dedmon potentially, who they're probably going to use at center. Pau Gasol, another big man. And David Lee. I don't see little David Lee standing up to a guy like Paul Millsap. So at 6,900, I definitely think he's in play, especially for cash games. The only concern is he is playing San Antonio. They have a very good defensive-minded coach, and that could hold them up a little bit, even without LMA. Markieff Morris in Minnesota is very interesting. I don't know who's going to cover who. I would imagine Gortat's going to be on Towns, and Morris and Jiang will go at it. But at 6,500, coming off hitting a game-winning shot, even though he stepped out of bounds, there could be some karma coming from Markieff Morris. So he's not somebody I'm dying to target, but I certainly understand it. Same thing with Porter. Porter's matchup's going to be a little tough. I would imagine Wiggins is going to be on him. That's not really a place that I'm dying to attack either, but I certainly see merit in going there if that's where you want to go. Dirk Nowitzki at 6'2". Again, not a big fan of the game. I think Ibaka's going to end up covering him for a big portion, unless Nerlens Noel is out. If Nerlens Noel is out, then I guess you could look towards Dirk a little more, because that means that Valanciunas will be on him, and he's not somebody that could really get out to the perimeter to defend him. So at 62, it's not somebody I'm really targeting, but I get it if you want to go there. Like I said, I kind of understand it. Marvin Williams is somebody we've got to talk about. Marvin Williams, I believe his price came up to $5,900. He's got a matchup with Chicago, who's been struggling against power forwards ever since they got rid of Taj. And obviously we know Kaminsky went down, so Marvin Williams is one of the only power forwards they have left on this team. And we've seen him absolutely, after he did it a couple times, we've seen this guy really get going. 40, 48, and 50. Those are his last three DraftKings game logs. This guy has been crushing. And against New Orleans, in a matchup with Boogie Cousins, he got Boogie into foul trouble and managed to take 20 shots in that game. So I think you have to consider him. I wouldn't be surprised at 5,900 if he let people down. At 5,900, he's no longer super safe, just because of the fact that we know, even with all these minutes, we've seen a floor of like 16 with this guy. And his price is 59. So if you're looking for 5x here, you need basically rounded up to 6K. You need about 30 DraftKings points from this guy. And I don't think that's a guarantee. I think if for GPPs it makes sense because it's a possibility, but I don't necessarily think it's a guarantee. So in cash games, I don't know if I could trust that. What I do like is his minutes are going to remain high. He should continue to get 35 to 40 minutes a game because there really aren't many options to back him up. So definitely a consideration. Let's see. Willie Cauley-Stein is I like to play him at center, but he's power forward eligible, and I think we could really take advantage of that because he's got a phenomenal matchup against Orlando. Since Orlando got rid of Ibaka, they've been even worse down low. And when Vooch is starting, he's definitely the worst defender of the two, and I believe he's back and healthy. So at 5K, this is a dream matchup for a guy like Willie Cauley-Stein, who's still trying to prove he could play in this league. He's coming off a game where he didn't do all that well, but again, it's a situation where it's him and Koufos, and Koufos isn't exactly an offensive threat. Willie Cauley-Stein is the guy who kind of scores. So in his last two games, 12 shots, 11 shots. He didn't shoot all that well against Denver. That's the only reason. Even with bad shooting, 3 for 11, that's 27.3% from the field. He still managed to score 25.25 DraftKings points. He was only $5,000, so he at least hit value. So I think his floor in this game would be hitting value. And obviously he's been getting a lot more minutes, 42 against Washington, 35 against Denver. So I like Willie Cauley-Stein a lot in cash and GPPs both. Another guy worth mentioning, I can never say this guy's name right. I think it's Bjelica? Bejelica. Can't really spell it. It's 4K. He's got a matchup with Washington. But if you look, this guy's been getting run. I haven't really paid too close of attention. I don't get to watch too many of their games, but I watched against Golden State how they worked this guy in. I think it's Bjelica. I think that's his name, Bjelica. And he's been playing. They really like this guy. I don't know why his number is 88. That's kind of weird, but hey, he's from Europe, so hey, do you. But anyway, he's 4,000. His price came up, and there's a reason for that. 20.25 DraftKings points at 3,800, and then 30 DraftKings points against Golden State at 3,800. He's been coming through, and they played him in over 30 minutes in back-to-back games. So if that's going to be a trend where they continue to go, I'm definitely going to continue to go there. So Bjelica, 4K, definitely a GPP only option, but still an option. And the last guy I'm going to talk about for the power forwards is Juancho Hernangomez. He's a pain in my butt with the projections because they call him Juancho, and some people call him Juan, and it screws everything up. But it's okay if he wins us some money. I think we can forgive him. He's 3,900, and he's got a matchup with the Lakers. Phenomenal matchup. The only way I'm playing this guy, however, is if Wilson Chandler is out. Mind you, Wilson Chandler is probable, not questionable, not doubtful, but probable. So I probably won't be playing this guy. But if for any reason Chandler gets sick or he stubs his toe or whatever happens, he ends up being out, he's definitely going to be a value guy that I'm going to lean on, especially as a pivot away from a guy like David Lee. I did skip over David Lee, but he is worth mentioning. David Lee is 5K, so DraftKings has adjusted the fact that LMA is hurt, and when LMA is out, David Lee is supposed to be the next guy to step up in the starting lineup. He did against Golden State, however, he only played 18 minutes. That's a little alarming. Now, he did get 22 DraftKings points in those 18 minutes, which is pretty good. However, there is some concern when you're paying 5K for a guy, you want to know he's playing. And it could have been a matchup thing. Golden State obviously had to go small because they were missing a lot of their key guys for rest. So this is a situation where against a guy like Millsap, they might have to play him. I'm not positive on who their backups are, so you might want to check into that. But at 5K, he's no longer a plug and play, but he's certainly a guy you have to look at, especially if you think the San Antonio game is going to stay close. Finally, moving on to center, we talked about Karl-Anthony Towns. My favorite center of the day, probably everybody's favorite center of the day, Nikola Jokic, the Joker, 10-4 against the Lakers. I love targeting centers against the Lakers. They are just that bad at defending centers. Them and Philly are just up there. You know, just when you think that, obviously you guys know I'm a Knicks fan, just when you think that your team is the worst at defending the center position, there's a team all the way across the country who steps up and really makes you feel better. And then there's a neighbor in Philadelphia who makes you feel even better. So there's a couple teams that are worse than my Knicks at guarding the center. There's not a lot, but there's a couple, and the Lakers are one of them. If Joker is going to get at least 30 minutes here, I think his upside is ridiculous. He could possibly put up 60, 70, 80 DraftKings points. And I don't know. I would think he's going to be chalk just because he's against the Lakers in the back end of a back-to-back and the highest total on the board. But for some reason, people just don't play this guy. No idea why. Like I said, 10-4 is not out of range for this dude. I think that he's shown us that against Sacramento, 45.5, he was sick, and he only played 30 minutes. That was kind of his floor performance at 45.5. And he's still not killing you at 10-3 at that point. So I think he's very safe in both cash and GPPs. Obviously, pay attention. He's been sick. You want to make sure he's going to play. But I would assume he's going to play. He's played twice with this illness, and that was in a back-to-back. So I'm all over the Joker against the Lakers at 10-4. Hopefully it's not too bad of a blowout, but like I said, I think a lot of people make the mistake of avoiding these, quote-unquote blowout-style games, and the game ends up staying close until there's about 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and all the starters have played all their minutes. So don't miss out here. Play the Joker at 10-4, and if I'm wrong, you can, like I said, you can yell at me on Twitter all you want if it makes you feel better. That's fine. Plumlee's worth talking about. He's 6-1 against the Lakers. Now, if for any reason you wanted to pivot off of Plumlee, I would think that off of Jokic, I would think going to a guy like Plumlee would be interesting. He's 6'1", and even as a backup, we saw in his last game, he played 21 minutes against Sacramento. That's it, 21 minutes, and he still got 35.75 DraftKings points. So GPPs only because his minutes are insecure, but definitely somebody worth considering. And if you want to pivot, if you want to attack the Lakers but pivot off of Jokic, play his backup at half the price. I think that's definitely in play. Marc Gasol against Milwaukee's in a phenomenal spot. He's 7,300. He didn't do well against Atlanta for me, even without Howard. That's because he shot 27.3% from the field. If you shoot 27.3% from the field, you're not going to have a good game, no matter how you slice it, unless you're Draymond Green and you can get a triple-double without points. But he played 27 minutes against Atlanta, 3 for 11 from the field, 19.5 DraftKings points. That's not going to cut it on a regular night. He's got a phenomenal matchup against Milwaukee, though, so I think this is a great spot to bounce back, and I definitely like him a lot. DeAndre Jordan, if Gobert is out, becomes a solid play at 6,500. His price has also been crazy cheap. Nikola Vuce is 6,900 against Sacramento, certainly in play here. I'm not too worried about Willie Cauley-Stein defense or Koufos defense, and this guy obviously has a monster usage rate. The only problem I have with the guy is I don't want to play him and Fournier together. I could. I don't necessarily want to. I prefer to play a point guard with him, but I think that I like Fournier a little bit more, so I'll probably play Fournier more than I play Vooch. But either way, 6,900 if you want to play him, I get it. Dwight Howard is 6,200 and he's rested. He's got a matchup with Dedmon and Gasol. Not too worried about that. I think his price is very interesting. Again, I don't know if you could trust him in cash necessarily, but he's been consistently breaking 30 DraftKings points. He's done it for a while now, so he's certainly in play, and they're going to definitely need him against the San Antonio team. Greg Monroe at 5,500. I know he has upside. I don't think I'm going to go there. Cody Zeller at 5,100. Definitely an interesting play. He hasn't been. Listen, this is a guy he's your typical cash game guy. He's pretty safe. His floor is around 20 to 25. His upside is around 30 to 35. But the bottom line is at 5,100, you can take that chance in a cash game because you know he's going to get minutes. 40 minutes against New Orleans, 31 against Orlando, 42 against Miami, 34 against Indiana. They don't have a backup right now. So similar to the Marvin Williams situation, they have no choice. No matter how bad this guy may be, no matter how much they might hate their lives because of it, they have no choice. They have to play this guy. They don't have a backup. So because of that, Zeller becomes an interesting play, especially for cash games at 5,100. So that's going to do it for the game-by-game breakdown. I appreciate you guys listening. If you're not a member of wisetake.com, please go to wisetake.com and sign up. Membership is free. You get access to our free NBA DFS projections, our cheat sheets, our odds charts, everything, DVP. We also have a forum on there. We're trying to get it going, trying to start a little DFS community, all help each other out, help everybody win some money. Like I said, you can always find me on Twitter at CK_013. You can also follow the WiseTake Twitter at Wise_Take. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that like button. We really appreciate it. Hit the subscribe. This way you're notified every time a video comes out. If you're listening on Podbean or iTunes, please follow us, subscribe to the channel, leave us some reviews, bump us up those rankings. We really appreciate it. And to be honest with you, even if maybe there's somebody said you didn't like or you don't like how the show is going, let me know. I want to hear the feedback. I can handle it. I promise you. I'm a grown man. And I want to hear about it so I can make the show a little bit better for you guys. That's what I'm here to do. So anyway, guys. Like I said, it's 8-game slate. It's my bread and butter. I prefer these slates. Like I said, 10 to 12 is too big, and anything under 5 for me is a little too small. But 8 games is right on my alley, so I think it's a great GPP slate. I'm going to, in closing, say what I always say. If you're trying to win money seriously, you better be on your computer or on your Twitter, on your phone, whatever it is, at least half an hour before lock. Because the late news is the best news, and how you interpret and react to this information is going to determine whether you win or lose that night. And I'll stand behind that 9 nights out of 10 nights. Anyway, guys, as always, good luck.